It's often stated that it's a miracle that any game comes out. Video games are an extremely costly and inherently risky form of media to produce, with often very little reward if your game isn't attached to a bigger property. Unlike a lot of forms of entertainment, it's extremely difficult to just start making a game. Although game development has become more accessible overall, making one video game on your own is a Herculean task. Even teams with skilled designers, programmers, artists, and composers often don't end up finishing the projects they envision. Whether it be due to scope, or budget, or some other unforeseen circumstances, a lot of great games never get the chance to shine. The games that do end up releasing will go through some inevitable change. Some of these can be extremely minor, like slight texture changes or level layouts or character design tweaks, while other games are forced to shift the console they come out for. Some rare cases have their entire basic framework changed from what they originally set out to be, but against all odds still end up releasing despite the huge shift in the original vision. There's few other games that I feel demonstrate this the best than Super Mario Sunshine. Now on the surface, you might be a little confused by that idea. Although it's not as universally praised as the likes of Odyssey or Galaxy, Sunshine is still a pretty fun game that can stand on its own. With that being said though, I think most can agree that the game has its quirks. I don't think it's a stretch to say that Sunshine is a pretty rushed and overall unpolished game. There are so many bizarre things under the hood of this game that it's something you've no doubt experienced firsthand or seen.
It's okay. Yes? Yes, just fall. Just oh my god! Are you kidding me? What happened? What happened? No! I'm out! I'm out! What?
Now what?
Mario Sonic, there's a timer. Yes.
What in the
So, why is the game like this? Well, Nintendo has never really gone out of its way to go super in-depth with Sunshine's development, only sharing small snippets of how Sunshine came to be. Even with these small, disconnected pieces, there's still a story here that I've never seen anyone cover before. It's something that's fascinated me for years and can be something that's pretty hard to unravel at times. I've discussed beta elements and cut content on this channel before, but this is going to be a little different as there's significantly more to cover. Let us begin this dive into the abyss known as Super Mario Sunshine. Before we begin, I just want to give a huge shout out to the Sunshine Hut Discord and the Boutique Discord. Both of them were insanely helpful and nice to me and answered all of my questions and just helped me a lot throughout the making of this video, and I definitely would not have been able to make it just anywhere near as good without their help, so huge shout out to both of them. So how did this kooky concept of a game even come to fruition? Well, it partially originates from the controller itself. When Koizumi first tried out the GameCube controller, he noted how similar pressing the triggers felt to using a water pistol, and so the idea of Mario using some kind of water gun grew from there. Apparently, their top idea was to just give Mario a water gun, but specifically opted not to because of America. Some other ideas they pitched include Mario just spitting the water out of his mouth. As hilarious an idea this is, I don't think it's a good idea to have a game where Mario goes around spitting on people, but it is unbelievably funny to think about. It's possible that this is the reason why Yoshi spits up juice in the final game. Eventually, they settled on the idea of a water pump, which would become Flood. There were a lot of ideas for different nozzles at this stage, about 10 according to Koizumi. One of them shot directly upwards like a firework, which I have no idea what this would have been useful for, but it's a neat idea. One functioned like a sprinkler. Another nozzle vaguely referenced in the game's code but not mentioned directly in any interviews is a sniper nozzle. This one I could definitely see some potential use for, but again, maybe they just wanted to avoid similarities to any kind of gun. The most interesting one they mentioned is a Yoshi nozzle, which actually has a model left in the final game. I can see why they didn't go with this, as it's unfathomably horrific looking. Believe it or not, the hover nozzle was actually one of the least popular ideas they had. A pretty defining part of Sunshine's gameplay was something the devs thought little of initially. However, this probably has a lot more to do with what Sunshine was when they were originally prototyping the game. At the earliest stages of Sunshine's development, the game was about cleaning up the pollution caused by various enemies and helping people around the island with whatever problems they might have. The specific way they described it was a disaster recovery mission style. Now, I sorta understand the first thing, stomping Koopas is kinda Mario's specialty. But what exactly would helping people around the island entail? Well, we actually do have some insight into how a few of these missions might have played out. Hidden deep within Sunshine lies a series of unused text depicting some of these missions. But before we look at those, I think it's important to actually get a glimpse as to what this version of Sunshine looked like. You see, there exists one singular look we as the public have ever gotten at this original version of Sunshine. It happened during Spaceworld 2001. For those unaware, Spaceworld was Nintendo's own little expo in Japan where they'd showcase their upcoming projects. These events are a treasure trove of lost media, but for now I'll only be looking at Sunshine. So let's see with our own eyes what the original Super Mario Sunshine looked like. Alright, I think it goes without saying that this is pretty different looking to what we ended up getting. I mean, just look at Mario running around this very early Delfino Plaza. This trailer is honestly awful. It doesn't give any indication as to what the gameplay of Sunshine will be like, which is probably on purpose. Sunshine itself wasn't even a big talking point at Spaceworld, as the reveal trailer for Wind Waker also debuted here and caused a whole slew of controversy. This trailer was so early that Miyamoto was actually hesitant to show it off.
Now, I'd like to show you new Mario first. I will show a little bit about it in the video. Oh, I'd like to ask you a favor. Mario and Zelda is scheduled to be launched next summer and Christmas, so the video I will show you is very, very confidential. Mario next summer and Zelda Christmas. I thought it might be too early to open to public, but we decided to show you only on this stage, and it can show some ability of GameCube too, so it's a strictly confidential basis.
The version of the game showed off here is still seemingly utilizing the old disaster relief gameplay structure, although this trailer itself doesn't really demonstrate it in any way. In fact, it doesn't really show Mario doing anything outside of a couple jumps and shots of the plaza. He doesn't even spray water at any point. Even so, there's a lot to dissect in this. I've only really scratched the surface here, so let's start really diving into what this game was. Starting with this. This is what we call a human girl. Yes, before their appearance in Mario Odyssey, humans were set to debut in Sunshine. In fact, at some point in development, there were only humans around the plaza, which seems to have already changed when this trailer was made, as we do see some extremely unfinished looking Pianta models here. We'll actually be coming back to this little lady, so keep her in mind for later. This trailer also gives us a glimpse at this horrific creature. This infamous nightmarish ghoul is the scrapped enemy/boss Hinokuri 2, alternatively known as Fire Chestnut, and there's a lot to talk about with him. On the surface though, this trailer doesn't tell us anything about what this freak actually did. Unfortunately for us, Hinokuri survived and lies dormant within Mario Sunshine. He actually spawns immediately in one of the game's test levels, so let's see what this abomination is capable of. About what I expected. Yeah, so he's not really programmed very well here, but there's still a lot to go into with this bastard. For instance, you might be wondering why our buddy here doesn't have his iconic fire chestnut shell. Well, it's related to how you get rid of this monstrosity. In order to defeat a Hinokuri, the player needed to spray his shell full of water until it burst like this. Then all you had to do is simply stomp on its one disgusting, unflinching eyeball rested upon the top of his dome. And there you go, it's dead. For now at least, as it's likely there were many different types of Hinokuri. I mean, this one is internally known as Hinokuri 2, so who knows how macabre Hinokuri 1 was. Hinokuri 2 actually has a unique property that drains Mario's water alongside doing damage. Okay, so this is a bit of an addendum I need to make. This man right here, Sun, who's been very helpful and very nice during this whole process of making this video, has graciously gifted me with some footage of this in action, so here you go. The most interesting thing about it to me is that Mario, like, actually drops water when he gets hit. I don't know, I just thought that was pretty funny and worth mentioning. This seems to be a remnant from when they were seemingly the same thing as shown in the Spaceworld trailer. I'm not entirely sure on how this would have worked exactly, but I have my theories that I'll discuss more later. He even has an unused mask variant, which you would have broken by spraying it. Had this abomination continued development, it likely would have had even more variants like this. Unlike other enemies, Hinokuri 2 seems to not bother directly engaging with Mario in any way. Instead, he simply runs around dropping stews during his rampage. It even has animations for jumping and diving, although what he's diving into is unclear. One can only imagine the true, unmitigated horror this hellspawn will cause when he returns. Let's hope he never comes back up. There's another unused enemy, likely from around this same era, although he isn't present for the Spaceworld reveal. This is Cug, or at least it's a drawing of Cug. No 3D model of him exists, so it's unclear if he ever made it very far. Cug appears to be an early idea for a Delfino Goomba variant, which would fit right alongside the Gloombas from Super Mario World. Despite never making it, the devs seem pretty fond of him, as he seemingly was used as a test enemy, having these strange animations. He also appears on several of the game's pollution maps. Pollution maps are something that I don't think I'm qualified to explain properly, so here's a more thorough explanation. But in a basic sense, they kind of function like coloring books determining how Mario can interact with goop. Pollution maps aren't the only place Cug appears, as he technically still makes an appearance within the game. Cug is hidden under Peanut Park. Due to Sunshine's fun collision, it's actually possible to get out of bounds and interact with Cug. Although he isn't visible to the player, only appearing as a standard question mark object. Oddly, Cug electrocutes the player when interacted with. Not entirely sure what to make of that. The thing that fascinates me the most about Cug is that he's likely our only look at Sunshine's concept art. Nintendo has never actually released a single piece of official concept art for Sunshine. To me at least, it seems like Cug was originally a piece of concept art that later got worked into Sunshine for various testing purposes. I'm judging this based on Cug's unique rendering style that actually does somewhat resemble the game's Wanted poster, although I can't say for certain this is what Cug was, as again, there's no other concept art to compare it to. Maybe one day we'll get a big book featuring concept drawings of all the Mario games, but for now there's nothing I can say really for sure. Maybe somewhere out there in the Nintendo vault exists a sketch of Hinokuri 2 similar to Cug. Hopefully it looked better on paper than it did in 3D. Alright. Let's pull back from this. There's still a few small things to mention, like this odd white ball in the trailer. A soccer ball exists within one of the game's test levels, so this is likely a later version of that same ball. Okay, so something I neglected to mention in this original recording block is that there's actually another enemy that appears here. You might have noticed him if you were paying close enough attention to the Spaceworld video, as it's what Hinokuri is dropping as he runs. These creatures are an early version of the game's swooping stews, sporting a radically different design with an orange head covered in green dots and a white body. Just figured that was worth mentioning before going into this next part. I think it's finally time to show off Super Mario Sunshine's original progression. I'll be formatting these into different episodes, sorta like the final game. There's nothing to suggest that's how these worked at all, I'm just using it as a narrative device for the video. So let's finally dive into these and see what Sunshine's old structure was like. Starting with...
You there, are you from the hotel? So someone finally showed up. The train to the hotel left without us. What do we do with all this luggage? You're not going to make me carry them myself, are you? Well, how appallingly rude! Ugh, never mind that. We've no time for this. I'll make a complaint when we reach the hotel. Now then, listen carefully. In the midst of these unthinkable events, my darling daughter, Nico, went missing. Look for my daughter, right away. Good. I'm counting on you. Please, you simply must bring my daughter back to me. Huh? My ears must be playing tricks on me, right? What the heck? Time is of the essence. While you stand here yammering, my Nico, What are you doing? Haven't you found my daughter yet? Do try and work for your wages.
So this is Mumsy, a rich mother who's lost her daughter and tasked Mario with finding her. The player would have found her eating ice cream. Interestingly, not only is there an ice cream cart still left within the game, but we can actually see it in the Spaceworld trailer. And directly across from it, we can see the human girl. I believe this is Nico, so I'll be referring to her as such. It is possible that this girl could have just been a separate, unrelated character, though. But I do think her placement to the ice cream stand and general design make her a likely fit for Nico. But you're free to think otherwise. I'm mainly just using this as an excuse to have at least one character with a visual representation. Anyways, here's what Nico had to say.
Huh? Oh, it's still light outside. I was eating ice cream when suddenly everything went dark. Oh, that hat. Must be from the hotel. You're what's called a bellboy, no? Huh? My mother? She's waiting for me at the station? With a pile of luggage? Okay. Lame. No chance you'll leave me alone? You're not exactly accommodating, huh? I'm not going anywhere, though. If you think you can move me, come on and give it your best shot. Hey, I'm not finished eating yet.
So it seems like Mario actively had to push Nico toward her mother. At first it seemed like an odd quest, however, when I thought about it more, it's actually pretty close to Mario 64's Penguin mission in a sense. So what happens when you actually manage to push Nico back to Mumsy?
Oh, my sweet little Nico. Mumsy was so worried about you. Oh my, what on earth are you eating?
Oh, hi, Mom. What are you still doing here? And where'd Dad go anyway?
Nico, my darling, do call me Mumsy. No more of this mom business. You make me sound like an old hag.
Oh, right. I remember now. Dad's off buying some ice cream. I'd completely forgotten.
In any case, you there. Here's your tip. It's not much, but here you are nonetheless.
Alright, mission accomplished. Mother and daughter reunited. But what exactly was this tip that she gave Mario? Well, it was likely soul coins, the original currency used in Sunshine. You can see what they looked like via the Spaceworld trailer as they're displayed on the UI. You can see a few lingering out in the open, so they were also collectible around the levels as well. But what was the actual use for soul coins? Well, that can be answered with our next episode.
Hey, Mr. Mustache! Where do I find the station? My teacher said to go there if we get lost. Oh, and Mr. Mustache, I've got a favor to ask. I'm here all on my own, so won't you walk with me to the station? You're a good guy, Mr. Mustache. I'll do my best to follow you. Just don't leave me behind, okay? Oh, yeah, you can also use this. But promise me you'll give it back after, okay? Scout's honor! It's true what my teacher said. The world's a pretty unforgiving place.
You may have caught on earlier that Mumsy also mentioned a train station. This was how Mario was originally going to travel around Isle Delfino. Using soul coins, you'd purchase tickets for each of the game's levels.
Will you be riding with us today? Please let me see your ticket. Now departing for Bianco Hills. See you next time. Right now, the travel stamps at Bianta Village are on sale at Bianco Hills. Will you purchase a travel stamp to Bianta Village? Thank you for traveling with us.
Personally, I actually really adore the idea of Mario having to travel around the island using this train. Although I do wonder where this train and station would have been located. Maybe it's in this spot where all these Piantas are gathered. I mean, this is the only seemingly enterable building we see during this era. Keep the train station in the back of your mind. I'll talk about it more when we get into the layout of Isle Delfino. For now, let's see what our little buddy Rownie has to say.
How'd I get back here, you ask? That's a good question. These things just happen sometimes, you know? Anyway, pull yourself together and let's head to the station. Oh, man, that was scary. I hate being by myself. Hey, are we at the station yet? We're here! This is it, Mr. Mustache. We made a good team, didn't we? You know what? You can hold on to my nozzle. Scout's honor!
You received the reverse nozzle. Now you can use it whenever. However, if you took damage, it will break.
So for escorting Rownie, Mario was given something called the reverse nozzle. From his description, this seems to be an early version of the turbo nozzle.
Oh, Mr. Mustache! Have you been using my nozzle? If you use the reverse nozzle during a foot race, you'll be able to go super fast! Have you tried it?
More interesting than that, though, is that this nozzle would apparently break if Mario took damage. In order to get another, you'd have to talk to Rownie again.
Huh? Where's the reverse nozzle? There you go. Don't lose it again, okay? Scout's honor.
Honestly, I'm not sure if this implies just getting hit once would break the nozzle. If so, I guess that sort of just makes the nozzle an extension of Mario's traditional power-up. There actually might be evidence of this in the Spaceworld trailer, as in this shot you can see Mario with no water and a nozzleless flood. I think this here is essentially Sunshine's equivalent of a small Mario. It seems like if Mario took too much damage, he'd lose not only water, but whatever nozzle he had equipped. Maybe instead of dying, the only major punishment for getting hit would be the loss of resources. Anyways, let's check back on Nico and her family.
Hey, Mr. Bellboy. You seem decent enough, so do me a favor. My dad went to go buy some ice cream, but he hasn't come back yet. So, I want to go look for him and all, right? But, well, it's just that I wasn't too sure about those mummies, you know? But you get it, right? The favor I'm asking? Go look for my dad, okay? My dad is totally hopeless when it comes to directions. There's no way you'll find him anywhere normal. My dad's managed to get himself lost over and over again in the same town. Yeah, I know, right? It's not something we can do normally. Anyway, take your time looking for him. What? But how come? I thought we were friends.
So this mission would have seen Mario searching for Nico's dad, but where is he exactly? Well, that's where things get a little confusing.
You there? You must be from the hotel. Your door opening skills tell me something. You've been doing this for a few decades, yeah? And then you have me. Just look at me, standing here in distress with both hands full of ice cream, unable to open the door. My daughter begged me, "Please, Daddy!" So that's how I ended up in this position. Anyway, I hate to trouble you, but won't you please open this door for me? Then we can get out of here. Boy, you there! I asked you to open the door. I didn't tell you to shut it. Oh, it's no use. The ice cream will surely melt at this rate, and my daughter's out there waiting for me. Could it be? Is this it? Is this the end? Have I finally gotten stranded? Very well. Go on and show me how a professional would handle this door.
So I was initially pretty confused reading this, but I think I have an answer. I think this quest would have taken place in an early version of Hotel Delfino. This is somewhat supported by what the family said earlier about the hotel. Even so, this whole quest seems kinda strange. I'm not exactly sure how it was supposed to work. I'm just not really sure, what's happening. Is he stuck in a room? Is he stuck in some maze? I really don't know. There is a series of unused Mario quotes that have references to doors, so maybe they're related to this quest.
Hello, door. Another door.
Regardless, Mario frees Daddy from his door prison and reunites with his family. Time for our reward.
Oh, it's that guy from the hotel. So, you gonna go get some ice cream? Well, it's sort of melted already, though.
Oh, there you are, Dad. Welcome back.
Nico, stop that at once, please. You must simply call me Daddy, like you usually do.
Dear, just how many times do you need to get before you're satisfied? You don't need to be embarrassed. Next time you plan on getting stranded, at least say something to me beforehand.
Oh, Mumsy. My beloved Mumsy. I bought some ice cream for you too. Here you are. Eat up.
Oh my! It's all melted!
Yes. By the heat of my love for you.
Well, I don't want it!
Oh, well. This is what you'd call a family, I'd guess. Thank you very much, mister. Oh, right. Your tip. I didn't forget. Really.
Again, we're seemingly gifted with more soul coins. You know, we don't really know much more about what else could be purchased with soul coins. Outside of tickets and stamps, there isn't any other indication as to what they did. Maybe Mario could use soul coins to purchase new nozzles? Just speculation on my part. Anyways, on to our next quest.
What? No, I wasn't nutting up. I was inspecting this here floodgate. The gate's no good anymore, you see. It's all falling apart, you see. It's in need of some serious repair work, you could say. If only I had something slippery and slimy and rumbly, then I could get it to work again, I bet.
I think I speak for most of us when I ask, what the fuck is this dude talking about? I've tried so hard to decipher what he's asking for and have come no closer to finding an answer. If you have any insight into what this man is asking for, please let me know in the comments. Okay, so I decided to ask a bit more about it, and it seems like the whole rumbly thing is actually just like a poor translation, and it more means like something sticky, so I think I was correct with my assumption of it being a lubricant of some kind. Anyways, you eventually give him whatever it is he needed.
That's perfect. I think it'll work now. Thanks to your help, mister, I managed to get it working. You have my thanks. It's fine now, you see. Works like a charm, you see. So, what do you want to do?
So it seems like this quest would have unlocked the ability to open and close the floodgate. Not really sure what this would have done exactly, but it's still interesting that we have a quest that rewards the player with a way to slightly alter the level in some way. Alrighty, on to our final mission.
Huh? Master Mustache, I thought you were returning home to your own country with the children.
Okay, I feel the need to interject here early because I actually didn't at any point address this in my script, but I think when he says children, I assume he's talking about toads? Alright, continuing on from that.
Goodness, we're saved. Just look at this state of affairs. Why, it's horrible. At this rate, our annual tourism rating will be a big fat 0. This year will mark the end of our decade-long 5-star streak. Oh, how could this happen? And it just had to happen while I was mayor. Why, oh why? But goodness me, this will never do. It's not the time or place for me to bellyache, is it? Master Mustache, I will no longer entreat you as volunteer. I beg you, please turn Delfino Plaza back into the beautiful town it once was. Goodness me, you have my thanks. Please, for the sake of our ratings, no, for the safety of our town. Oh, goodness me. Master, you mustn't say such things. We're counting on that flood.
This actually might be the most straightforward mission we've had so far. Mario is entrusted with cleaning up Delfino Plaza, or Dalpic Town as it's known as here. This would have involved cleaning up our rainbow goops seen throughout the Spaceworld trailer, and slaying our favorite ghoul over here. You know, we're probably just gonna get rewarded with more soul coins for this, but I'd end this freak for free. Either way, let's see what Mario's reward is.
Oh, goodness me, Master Mustache. The results for Delfino Plaza's annual tourism rating just came in. It's a whopping 5 stars. Goodness me, thank you. We owe it all to you, Master Mustache. Oh, I'm so glad I'm mayor. You have my thanks, Master Mustache. This is the town's way of showing our gratitude. Please, keep it quiet.
This is where I originally assumed the mayor's dialogue ended. However, there's seemingly another version of this conversation that's listed immediately after this one. It's not too different from the one I showed off, but it does have a few notable changes. One is the inclusion of someone who clearly isn't the mayor telling Mario that the mayor isn't feeling well. In addition, he also mentions this star rating, which might have related to how progression worked in Sunshine originally. This other dialogue also has the mayor tell Mario to visit the other towns on the island, which is likely the trigger that allowed him to explore the rest of the isle. And that, my friends, is the perfect transition to talk about the actual layout of the island, because it went through some pretty major changes. Koizumi actually modeled out the entirety of Isle Delfino in clay. This model gives us our only true glimpse at the early layout, so let's start with what we know for sure. First off, we have our original Delfino Plaza. Even at a glance, it's pretty obvious just how different it is compared to what we got. At this point in development, I think the plaza was more or less just a starting level, rather than being the game's main hub world. One detail we can make out from the clay model is that the airstrip was originally attached to the plaza itself, which does make a lot more sense than having it be an entirely separate island. You know, personally, I've watched the Spaceworld trailer so many times at this point. The original Delfino Plaza was always super fascinating to me, and I really wish we had the chance to explore it. Well, as it turns out, they didn't completely scrub the original Beta Delfino. You see, hidden within the bowels of Sunshine is a height map depicting our original plaza. A height map is another thing I'm not qualified or interested in explaining, but just know it shows us this, which matches almost perfectly with what we saw in the Spaceworld reveal. Using this, several recreations of the original town have been created, including this one made by the incredible Portable Productions for their mod Super Mario Sunshine 2001, which I highly recommend checking out after this video. However, Delfino Plaza is not the only level we see in the Spaceworld reveal. A few shots showcase an early Bianco Hills, and once again, the layout is completely different. This area overall feels much more like a upper-class gated community or a coastal villa, with all the big houses and pools. It's got a little fountain area. It even had its own Hino curry too. And in this shot, we can briefly see him spit up goop. That's great, I'll be sure to add that to his war crime tally. More importantly, there's an apparent lack of any waterway or windmill, two defining features of the final game's Bianco Hills. Okay, I need to make a huge addendum here to the windmill thing. So I was actually re-watching the trailer just to, confirm a lot of the things I was talking about, and I realized in this shot, you can actually straight up see the windmill back there. You can see it, right there. Clear as day. So yeah, Beta Bianco Hills had a windmill, for sure. My bad. But I can definitively say there's no waterway, and I can prove it. Using our little clay model, we can see that the original spot of Bianco Hills was directly beside the plaza, and attached directly below it, we can see an early Rico Harbor. Unfortunately, we never actually see Rico Harbor in the Spaceworld trailer. However, we do have one look at the original harbor. Again, hidden within the depths of Sunshine is a screenshot showing off an extremely early build. This screenshot is actually used as part of the texture for Eelymouth's eye. You can catch a glimpse of it in the final game if you hit the right angle. Unfortunately, this screenshot doesn't show off a lot of the harbor itself. We can see a couple of ships docked here, as well as these funny little bloopers. In the distance, you can actually see part of the original plaza, showing just how close they were. You can also spot the old airstrip, which has a pretty modern design. I think now's a good time to really take a good look at this clay model, because there's a lot more here than you might think. Let's start by directly comparing it to the final island. Here, you can see how some of the basic terrain changed. For instance, the tail was originally connected to the island itself, rather than being cut off. This version of the island, or at least one very similar to it, can actually be spotted in the game's opening. The easiest giveaway to this is the early plaza and airport that can be spotted. You can even see how the plane is clearly flying towards the original airstrip. The shot after this shows off another early version of the isle. Although this one is notably closer to the final, it still uses the early Rico layout. So, using all of this, let's try to see if we can map out what the original Isle Delfino may have looked like. Let's get the obvious ones out of the way first. The airstrip, plaza, Bianco Hills, and Rico Harbor were here. This is obviously Corona Mountain, and we can even see a brief glimpse of it during the Spaceworld reveal. Something of note is that Corona Mountain may have actually been more of a full level based on this unused header. The final game's Corona Mountain is so awful that it wouldn't surprise me if it was made in the last 2 or 3 months of development. When I was recording footage for this video, this happened. After that, I just kind of stared into the flames for 20 minutes. Anyways, from here, there's a lot of room for interpretation. If you're familiar with the general layout of Isle Delfino, then you'll probably be quick to fill in the blanks. When I first tried to map this out, I found that, on the surface at least, the general layout did seem to be pretty close to the final game. But there's still areas near the top of the island that don't seem to correlate to any levels in the final release. In addition, there's this small little dot here. I originally thought nothing of it, but it actually appears in the game's opening as well. and it even appears on this platform in Noki Bay. Speaking of Noki Bay, there's a pretty important detail I've intentionally glossed over until now. Do you remember the whole train thing? Well, it seems like trains weren't the only method of travel. Noki Bay, or Mare Village as it's called here, mentions a harbor rather than a station like several other levels have. This means that Noki Bay likely wasn't even on Isle Delfino itself. But more notable than that are mentions of various stations, entrances, and harbors for levels that were completely cut. Hotel Lacrimia meaning teardrop, Erto Rock, Erto meaning sleep, Warship Island, Lighthouse Island, and Fire Shrine. Side note, it's possible Hotel Lacrimia is the hotel Nico and her family were staying at and not Hotel Delfino, as they are listed as different places Mario could travel to. The last three names are placeholders as they don't follow the traditional naming conventions in Sunshine. Warship, Lighthouse, and Mare Village all specifically note being accessible via a harbor. This is a bit of speculation on my part, but I think it would make sense if Mario was only able to travel to different harbors using boats from Rico Harbor. Outside of these names, we have no insight into what any of these levels would have looked like. I think it's highly likely that the final Hotel Delfino probably uses some elements of Lacrimia, and Corona Mountain also likely shares some DNA with Fire Shrine, but again, this is all just speculation on my part. I would have loved to know what these levels entailed, outside of the fact that one was a lighthouse level and one was a hotel. I am really curious as to what a Fire Shrine level would have been like, as that definitely sounds like more of a Zelda thing than Mario. Regardless, I think it's safe to say that the clay model was probably made with some of these levels in mind, although where they were located is anyone's guess. Something else of note is that Serena Beach and Hotel Delfino are listed as different locations, so it's possible those were separate at some point. With all of this in mind, it's extremely hard for me to find any conclusive answer on what the true layout of Isle Delfino was. Probably the most confusing thing for me is the original location of Pina Park. I originally assumed that it was always on the tail. The game lists Pina Park as having a station, which makes sense as it was originally attached to the island. So what's the issue? Well, you see, Pina Park has something pretty interesting that no other level has. The game has unused data showing off two gateways to different levels, this big shell being the original entryway to Noki Bay, and the Pianta tree being the original entry gate to Pianta Village. We even got a small glimpse of this in one of Sunshine's Japanese commercials. Here we can see the same Pianta tree with a small opening in it. All of this seems to imply that Pina Park was an extension of the game's hub world. The original Delfina Plaza that we've seen has no clear signs of it being attached to an early Pina Park, so I guess the idea of it being connected came later after they pivoted the game to be more like 64. And then once it was decided that Pina Park would be its own level, it was moved again? I'm not entirely sure how else to explain it. Maybe Pina Park was always separate from the plaza and Mario could travel there freely whenever he wanted, kinda like how returning to the airstrip works in the final game. Okay, so while I was initially confused when I wrote and recorded this, I think I actually figured out how this would have worked. Remember that cannon in Serena Beach that you go inside for the secret level? Well, it actually has animations for shooting you back to the plaza, although it's a little off, so maybe the plaza moved slightly. Either way, this cannon was the original method of traveling between the islands, which actually makes a lot of sense. It seems like they just repurposed it later to be a secret level when they split the levels. In conclusion, outside of these four, I can't confidently place any other levels. It's possible the basic layout didn't change as much as I think, but Noki Bay being a separate island of some kind along with all the cut levels makes me think otherwise. But for now, that's pretty much every relevant piece of information regarding Sunshine's original concept and development during this period. The game was completely different, not just from what the final game ended up being, but basically any Mario game released before. The original vision of Sunshine was very experimental, a hallmark of Nintendo's development. Their experiments have led to some genuinely incredible and unique titles that are incomparable to anything else on the market, but it's also led to plenty of duds along the way. I think the original Sunshine could have been a pretty interesting game, good or bad, but it's not the game we got. Instead, the devs completely shifted the vision of the game in only a year and a half and still released on time. So, how did they manage changing the entire game in such a small time frame? Well, fast forward to 2002. Sunshine's course has completely shifted and the game is now more closely following 64's design, a decision which Miyamoto himself described as conservative. Sunshine is set to make its first public appearance since the Spaceworld trailer at E3 2002. Prior to E3, some images were shared that showcased just how much the game changed. This build is overall starting to resemble the final game more, but we still have a lot of changes that were made. Starting with Flood's much slimmer design featured here and seen on the UI. This design seems much closer to the one seen in the Spaceworld trailer, so it's likely a partial holdover from that era. Mario has a different life meter here that stuck around for a while, as you'll see it in some of the E3 trailers. Bianco Hills has a pretty different layout with it, again lacking any waterway. There's this odd scene of Mario surrounded by Pokies, including this brown one which never made it into the final game. We can also see an early goop pattern in this screenshot. This pattern can still be found in the game, alongside the pollution map associated with it, and...
What the fuck is- What is that?!
I have no idea what this creature was supposed to be. It is plausible that this horrific beast was some kind of drawing of an enemy that got cut, or it's a weird interpretation of the game's wind spirits. I think the thing I loathe the most about it is this stupid little fucking hand it has. Like, what, is it supposed to be waving? Because I'm not waving back at Jeff the Killer. Honestly, I think I owe Hino Curry 2 an apology. Back to the pollution map itself, it's actually hiding another height map featuring the early Bianco Hills we see here. A recreation of this Bianco Hills was created by the Super Mario Eclipse team, so depending on when this video comes out, you actually might be able to explore this level. But for now, I can only show you footage. One interesting thing I noticed is that both this and the original Spaceworld design had a little fountain area. The final game doesn't have one at all. That's most of the screenshots shown off prior to E3 that I thought were notable. There are a few more screenshots which showcase some of Rico Harbor, although the level itself doesn't seem too different. The most notable screenshot is one featuring an early design for Gooper Blooper, as well as a different arena for the fight. Now this is pretty much everything available publicly, but there is actually another showcase of Sunshine from around this time. You see, an editor for the UK-based Nintendo GameCube magazine, Mark Green, was given special access to a short clip of Sunshine. While he wasn't allowed to show anything he saw, and no clips of it have ever surfaced, he did draw out some of the scenes to the best of his memory. The first drawing just shows Mario cleaning up some goop, likely around Delfino Plaza. The second shows Mario fighting a giant piranha plant, which is likely Petey, who we actually do see in one screenshot from around this time. The last drawing is pretty bizarre, as it shows Yoshi talking to Mario. Yoshi talking to Mario isn't actually too outlandish, considering he does this in Mario 64 and literally introduces himself to Mario in Super Mario World, since it has so many Marios in it. A lot of modern versions of the character just have him talk like a Pokemon and say his name, but he has been shown fully capable of speech in older Mario games and even some modern ones. Although it's also possible that Mark is mistaken here, as human memory is an extremely unreliable source. Interestingly, Mark's quote here seems to imply that Mario didn't even ride Yoshi in the clip. Maybe Yoshi's dialogue here functions similarly to Super Mario World, where once he hatches from his egg for the first time, he greets Mario and then never again. It's impossible to determine what Mark saw in these clips, as nothing resembling them has ever made its way to the public. Luckily, the world at large wouldn't have to wait much longer, as on May 22nd, 2002, Sunshine would finally reappear, with several trailers, promos, and even a full playable demo. The trailer they decided to show at their actual presentation is,
Throw fireballs at him, laugh at his mustache, but do not mess with his vacation.
Very 2000s, I'll say. Western gaming coverage at this time was a genuine nightmare, but let's move past that for now. Luckily for us, there's another trailer that was given out on a special CD for the previously mentioned Nintendo GameCube magazine. NGC's trailer even comes with this early Delfino Plaza theme, which is ever so slightly off compared to the final game. Of note is that both of these trailers appear to be running the game at 60 FPS compared to the final's 30, a change likely made fairly late into development, as even the game's original Spaceworld trailer ran at 60 FPS. Regardless, these trailers show off a build that is looking much closer to the final game overall. However, there's still some pretty significant differences. Flood's design has seemingly been finalized here, although the old life meter remains intact. We can even see this little spinning animation it does when Mario heals. We also get a look at a few levels, including the first public appearance of Gelato Beach and Hotel Delfino. Gelato Beach appears to be pretty close to the final, but one shot in the NGC trailer showcases the beach covered in electric goop, which Mario proceeds to slide through, meaning this goop didn't have these properties at first. Or they just haven't implemented that feature yet. Regardless, there's actually no episode of Gelato Beach in the final game that has goop at all, so what scenario this clip is showing is a mystery. Something to note is that in this build, Mario can completely cover himself in the goop, which you can't do in the final game, but the code for it still exists.
Oh, I love this mud. It just feels so good. Oh, yeah.
Mario also leaves a trail of goop as he walks, which is also still left functional. Hotel Delfino went through some pretty noticeable design changes. The entire color scheme of the hotel was changed, with it looking a lot more plain overall. This version is seemingly missing the pool, although there is still a door to the far right of the wall, so the pool just might not be visible from the outside. However, the pillar in the center seems to be completely absent. On the flip side, Bianco Hills is finally looking more complete, with the iconic waterway now being fully implemented. Something that was pointed out to me that I missed in my initial viewing is that in one shot you can actually see the goop moving. It sort of acts like weird tentacles on the gatekeeper. It honestly looks really cool, but I could see it potentially being hard on the GameCube's processing power, so maybe that's why they cut it. Although some of the building designs and locations are still slightly different. Rico Harbor is also seen, and it similarly looks to be near complete, with one major exception. Mario is shown blooper surfing on a non-colored blooper with several orange blocks placed around the water as blockades. You can even see one rise and lower into the water. This entire section seems to be an early version of Episode 6, Red Coins in the Water. And based on the generic blooper Mario is riding, I'd say they originally didn't have different types of bloopers you could ride. The Delfino airstrip is also very briefly seen, now officially separate from the plaza. There isn't too much to note about it in the English trailers or screenshots, but a Japanese-only preview disc features a special clip showing off the runway, featuring a Mario-shaped indent in the middle. The final game does still have the Mario graffiti, but the area around it is just a small crater in the ground. Finally, we get our first look at the new plaza, which is almost identical layout-wise to the final game, with some small changes. Like these crates scattered around the market, or this black pianta that never shows up in the final game. Most notable is a scene where Mario is being chased by a stack of strolling stews. No enemies appear in the final game's plaza, so these guys are extremely out of place. There's actually quite a few screenshots that depict other stews around the plaza. One screenshot even seems to show a generator for them, or at least that's what I have to assume this weird bright pink object up here is. Directly across from this is the ice cream stand, likely the same one seen in the Spaceworld reveal, and as found in the game's test level. Look, it's even got a little sign, how adorable. We can also see an early manhole design which, funnily enough, actually made its way into Brawl's version of Delfino Plaza. Last thing of note is the lack of entrance for any box minigame. Honestly wish it stayed that way. There's also like 2 burned trees around the plaza. I'm genuinely not sure why. There's just 2 burnt trees around the plaza. I have no idea what this was for. Near the end of the NGC trailer, we get our first look at Yoshi, who functioned completely differently at this stage. Yoshi hatches immediately upon contact and comes out as a classic green Yoshi. Rather than a juice meter, green Yoshi has a hunger meter. Some screenshots don't even show this hungry meter and instead just empty out Flood's water tank when Mario rides Yoshi. It seems like, at least in my opinion, originally, Yoshi needed to eat fruit first before being able to expel juice or change color. Although there's unfortunately no footage or screenshots to prove or disprove this. Either way, green Yoshi no longer being the default color had to have been an extremely late change, as all official renders show Mario riding a green Yoshi, and even the game's manual shows off green Yoshi in-game. On a more personal note, I was always extremely confused as to why I could never get my own green Yoshi. I tried different methods to unlock him, like unlocking Luigi in Mario 64 or any random character I wanted in Smash. Because why would they show me a green Yoshi if you couldn't get one in-game? Nintendo would never lie to me. They're literally my best friend. Outside of the main levels, a few clips showcase some of the Floodless sections, which features a very different skybox that's made up entirely of different colored blocks. And in this shot, we can even see the fabled debug cubes. These are pretty well known nowadays due to mistakenly appearing in the 3D All-Stars release before being patched out. And that's pretty much every interesting detail I could find on this version of Sunshine. There's some other small things like this weird stew flag here, but this was everything I thought was notable. The game is finally starting to take shape, but there's still another early build to discuss. You see, all that I've been talking about is only what they showed off for trailers and promo images. There's still an entire playable demo of Sunshine we haven't even looked at. So let's take a quick peek at that. This build was actually first played on stage by Miyamoto himself. This one is very close to the final game, but there's still some noteworthy changes here. We can actually hear a pretty major change in the first few seconds of Miyamoto's little gameplay demo. The music for Bianco Hills is different, and I honestly kinda like the slower tempo of it.
We've added a lot more as well. This lighting, micro blocking. As Mr. Mario being covered.
We can also see that the game's health meter has been finalized, albeit with a slightly different effect for when Mario takes damage. While we don't see a lot more here, the actual demos on the show floor have a bit more to offer. Although from here, most changes are extremely minor. A different skybox for this floodless level, some pretty strange and funky looking versions of Petey's vines that actually pulsate. There's an early low health sound. An early coin sound can also be heard. Outside of this, the only level with a notable change is Gelato Beach. The structure holding the Sandbird egg had small pillars around it, and more importantly, lacks the Sandbird egg. Instead, it's resting on a small platform behind the structure, which can be seen here. This version also seems to lack a trampoline of any kind, so it's plausible that the method of entry to the Sandbird level was slightly different at this stage as well. This change to Gelato Beach seems to have been an extremely late stage decision, as you can actually see part of the original design on some of the low poly models in the distance. You can even still see it in the level preview FMV. I also found a video of someone crashing the demo, which I don't think I've ever seen or heard of before.
Oh! Way to go. That's not good.
I also found a clip where this happens. I think that's just about every major difference I could find from this era. Now there is still more I could mention, like some textures and other things changed around the plaza slightly. There was originally a blue coin in the police station with seemingly nothing stopping Mario from just walking up and getting it. There are a near endless number of small changes made in basically every area of the game, but if I sat here and listed all of them, this video would never end. Plus, I think it's clear the most interesting stuff is past us at this stage. 3 months after its E3 debut, Sunshine would, against all odds, release on schedule. Despite having the game's entire basic structure and level design change, the game would still somehow be released when they originally promised it would during that Spaceworld reveal. I think the only game I'm aware of with the development cycle even comparable to this would be the original Resident Evil 2. Oh, but we're not quite done yet, as there's still lots of things hidden within Sunshine's code that I haven't gone over. From here, there's still a lot I could talk about. Some are pretty small, while others are fairly notable, but I couldn't find any room for them in any of the previous segments. So before we move into the last part, I'm gonna quickly go over some of the things I thought were interesting enough to include in the video. Starting with goop effects. The final game only uses 3, but many more were planned. One prevents Mario from moving laterally in it. One just straight up kills Mario instantly, which is pretty funny. The last one of note causes Mario to sink into it like quicksand, which uses an animation only seen during this. There's an unused save block, which appears to be just a standard Mario brick.
I like to build brown bricks with Minecraft.
There's an unused enemy, which seems like it was just a grounded version of the swiping stew. A pretty infamous topic I haven't gone over yet is the Noki Bay book. In the 3rd episode of Noki Bay, Red Coins in a Bottle, you can find a hidden door in this structure that you can't open, and behind it a book. Now there's been a ton of rumors about this thing over the years. Some people have claimed that in the Japanese version you have to collect this book as part of the objective, but this is false. The objective is the same in all regions. Some people claim it's a reference to the 1000-Year Door, but that doesn't make any sense to me, and it doesn't even resemble the book in TTYD at all. Honestly, I have absolutely no idea why this is here, so for now I'm just gonna assume they put it here to fuck with players. The more likely answer is that it's an asset related to a scenario that was changed and cut and they just reused it quickly without removing the book. But I think my previous answer is funnier, so I'm rolling with it. There's an unused Yoshi generator, which seems like it would have spawned eggs. There's an unused sandcastle, which lowers when sprayed or ground pounded. This seems to have been the original idea for Gelato Beach Episode 1 Dunebud's Sandcastle Secret. In the final game, you enter the sandcastle and then do a basic platforming section that doesn't actually relate to the idea of a sandcastle at all, outside of there being sand blocks. Something I neglected to mention when I was originally doing this is the fact that there's pretty much a Yoshi variation for every stage theme in the game, including ones where it's physically impossible for Yoshi to be in. I'm not going to sit here and play every single one. If you're curious about them, you can go to the cutting room floor and hear them all. The one I thought was the most noteworthy, though, was the secret stage. It's just like fire for some reason. And my personal favorite, on the title screen there was originally a small chance for Mario to say Ciao. Okay, so I actually got this wrong during my initial recording. It actually plays during startup, and it's a 1 in 8 chance of happening, so it's not exactly like a shiny Pokemon odds, but it's still cool.
Ciao!
A cute Easter egg, and one I'm not really sure why they seemingly went out of their way to disable. There's a couple of other unused Mario clips that I could have mentioned, so I'll just play them here.
Primo! Cool! Too cool! Perfect 10!
Oh, my head.
Feeling good! It's fun!
To reiterate, there's a lot of little things I could cover, but I don't feel like a lot of it is really pertinent to this video. If you're really curious on some of the details I glossed over, I'd highly recommend checking out the cutting room floor page on this game. It's probably one of the most extensive pages on the website, although it's worth mentioning that there's still a lot out there left undocumented. There's so much content in Sunshine that was very obviously rushed or quickly and often haphazardly changed that covering all of it would warrant an entirely different video. However, there is still one major detail I want to cover, and that's the fact that at some point during development, Sunshine experimented with a multiplayer mode. Very little data of it exists, but from what we can tell, the mode involved one player playing as Mario and the other as Shadow Mario. Most of what remains for it are extremely basic camera functions that attempt to show both players at once, which doesn't seem to work very well at all for how big Sunshine's maps are. No split screen exists, so the camera will just endlessly zoom out to keep both players on screen. Because of this, it's unclear as to what the end goal of this multiplayer was, or what even the basic gameplay loop would have been like. No interview, to my knowledge, has ever mentioned any multiplayer mode, so it's impossible to say for certain what any of this means. Maybe at some point they wanted to make maps dedicated to this mode. Maybe they did plan a split screen mode at some point, but never got around to it. Either way, the fact that they even attempted something like this is kind of insane to me. If Sunshine had a couple more months or even a full year of extra dev time, I wonder if this idea would have come to fruition. Any of the things mentioned throughout this video may have seen the light of day had Sunshine been given that, but I think there's one other factor that likely permanently changed the course of Sunshine's history. The story of Super Mario 128 is one that, up until recently, hasn't been very well documented. Most talk of a direct sequel to Mario 64 came in the form of baseless rumors and speculation. It wasn't until 2020 when Did You Know Gaming published a video which helped to uncover much of the information we know about it today. I'd recommend watching that video for a more direct and thorough explanation behind this, but the short of it goes something like this. A direct sequel to 64 would begin development on the N64 disk drive, which promised to feature Luigi as a full playable character. Side note, Miyamoto never explicitly gave a name for this sequel, so it's unclear if 128 would have been the actual name of the final product. Regardless, the colossal failure of the disk drive would end up shifting the game's development to the GameCube, where it quietly stood in the background, unseen by the public. Around this time, during Spaceworld 2000, a tech demo would be shown off, also named Super Mario 128, showing off 128 different Marios running around this terraforming disc. Now this was more to show off some of the GameCube's capabilities, but Nintendo still likely had some use for it. Nintendo has done this a lot, where they'll show off a tech demo and eventually develop it into a full game. While this demo was being shown off, 64-2, or the other 128, was still trucking along, with Miyamoto stating that he wanted the game to have a more adult direction, whatever that means. Miyamoto's vision be like, "It's a me, Super fucking Mario. It's also important to note that Miyamoto would go on to specify that 128 and Sunshine were unrelated entities. He would even go so far as to state that 128 would feature a new freshness that he felt was missing from Sunshine. So at this point, there were two projects at Nintendo called Mario 128, and one of them was a direct sequel to 64. So what happened? Well, most fans seem to believe that 128 would appear sometime during E3 2003, but this never happened. The reason, Miyamoto claimed, was that he didn't want anyone to steal ideas from it. However, 2004 would come with no sign of the game, and by 2005, Miyamoto seemed hesitant to talk about the game in any form, with him stating that he felt like he gave the wrong impression with 128, and that the next Mario game for the upcoming Revolution could be anything, as Nintendo frequently experiments a lot, something we've no doubt learned if this video is anything to go by so far. While 128 never saw release in any of its known forms, the ideas from it likely made its way into many other Nintendo games. The main one being Super Mario Galaxy, as noted by Miyamoto himself, although it's likely its influence stretches even further. Rideable Yoshi was likely introduced in Mario Sunshine as a result of these experiments, as it was something that was clearly on the team's mind after having to pass on Yoshi in 64. Miyamoto even claimed that 128 experiments were being done on the Nintendo DS. For a long time it was believed that the original 128 tech demo became the basis for Pikmin. However, very recently, Pikmin's programmer Yuji Kondo would later confirm that the tech demo wasn't involved with the creation of the game. Although interestingly, Pikmin itself does have unused models for both Mario and a Goomba, so it's possible Pikmin 1 and Mario are closer linked than we think. There's a lot more to the story of 64's ill-fated sequel, but again, I'd highly just advise watching the Did You Know Gaming video on the subject. So what does all of this have to do with Sunshine? Well, I'm going to propose two theories that might help explain why Sunshine is the way it is. Theory 1. Sunshine's gameplay shifted due to the slow and experimental nature of 128. As I mentioned before, GameCube sales weren't super strong out the gate, and having no mainline Mario game at launch definitely hurt the system overall. The team may have shifted the game to be more in line with 64 to make it more easily appeal to a general audience as a system seller. An experimental disaster relief game where Mario goes around a tropical island cleaning up questionable looking substances might not have done nearly as well as the more traditional 3D platformer. So, to fill in the gap while 128 was trudging along, Sunshine shifted its overall game design to match 64. This would come at the cost of several levels, nozzle types, and overall content. But the game would still manage to release on time, and would fill the niche that a lot of people at the time were craving, a new 3D Mario game. Something that I found pretty interesting is that, at the time, outlets like IGN and people on various message boards seemed to assume that Sunshine was a direct sequel to 64. And I can't exactly blame them for thinking that, especially when the trailer itself doesn't show anything outside of Mario running and jumping. When this trailer came out, 64 was 5 years old with no word on the next mainline Mario title, so maybe the devs felt obligated to give people what they want, or what they were expecting. Even with this massive shift, the game was still able to come out on time and, more importantly, come out in a time where Nintendo was in clear need of something to outshine the PS2. Here's just a few titles that released for the PS2 a year prior, just to give you an idea of what they were up against at the time. While I personally like this theory, it's not perfect. The biggest problem is that no one who worked on Sunshine has ever given any explicit reason for the game's sudden shift in direction. There have been games like Sunshine that were completely different and changed for more personal reasons related to the overall quality of the game. Which brings me to my other theory. Theory 2. The original Sunshine was a failed experiment. It is entirely possible that the original experimental vision of Sunshine wasn't very good. There could be any number of reasons as to why it wasn't very good, but if we subscribe to this theory, then at the very least, the people making the game did not like it. As I've said a few times in this video, Nintendo's video game development is often extremely experimental. Not every experiment they do works out, and maybe this was one they willingly chose to leave behind. I mentioned at the start of the video that it's a miracle any game comes out, and this is sort of part of why. Sometimes an idea is better in theory than it is in execution. Remember, Miyamoto didn't even want to show off Sunshine at Spaceworld. So maybe at that point the game was already changing direction. When I think about this theory in particular, I'm reminded of something Miyamoto himself said in this interview.
By the summer of last year, we had the basic player movements down, and we experimented with a lot of things, but Mario players felt there was something lacking. I think players want Mario to have a variety of actions and also things to discover. When I look back at it now, we were being quite conservative then, and the journey in the last year has been one of returning to the diversity of Mario 64.
You can interpret that quote however you like. Personally, I think there's likely a lot of truth in both theories, but it's also entirely possible that Sunshine shifted gears for a reason none of us could speak on. Either way, I think it's time we wrap up this video. Super Mario Sunshine is a game that I'd say I have pretty complicated feelings on nowadays. For everything I love about it, from the setting to the music, just the overall vibes of the game are superb. Flood is a fantastic tool for movement, which overall is pretty great in Sunshine. But then there's also Corona Mountain, just all of it, and the blue coins. Sunshine in general has gotta have some of the worst main and side levels in the series, made worse by the fact that you're required to complete 7 out of the 10 missions in each level to finish the game. In general, there's a ton of sloppiness you can see left in Sunshine, more than likely due to the lack of time. The game's cutscenes are a great example of this because there's so many really funny oversights they never bothered fixing. This one has Peach's eye texture on her earring. In the Japanese version of the trial, the prosecutor says shrine sprites.
Expert shrine scholars have determined that this darkness has arisen because of all of our guardians. The shrine sprites have vanished from their gathering spot at the shrine gate.
This is weirdly like one of the only things they fixed when it's honestly kind of minor in comparison to some of the other things they got wrong. Like during the game's ending cutscene, they placed 2 Ferris wheels on top of each other, including a red one which isn't used but can be seen in some shots. Outside of the cutscenes, there's just a ton of weird, confusing facets to this game. But despite having numerous problems with the game, it's honestly something I still have a strange amount of enjoyment of, even after all these years. Maybe it's just something about how weird and different it is compared to every other Mario game. Maybe it's the near endless trench of cut and beta content found over the years, or maybe it's just pure nostalgia bias. Most of Nintendo's early offerings on the GameCube are notable for being rushed in one way or another, but that doesn't inherently make the games bad. And I'd say that applies perfectly to Sunshine. It's very clearly not perfect, but neither are you, buddy. Don't let anything I or anything else someone online has to say about this game affect your feelings on something you love. There's tons of videos defending Sunshine and just as many discussing why it sucks. Sunshine has many good and bad qualities, and they've been discussed so much that I doubt I'd be adding much to this topic. Regardless of what side of the Sunshine spectrum you fall under, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're craving more Sunshine stuff, I highly recommend 2C Phoenix's series going over every level in depth. I learned way more than I ever thought I could about the game from these videos. This has easily been my biggest, most involved, and most laborious project so far, and I've been working on it for way too long. I definitely have other games I would like to make videos similar to this for, but those aren't going to be for a while. Still, if you're interested, I'd highly recommend subscribing. I'll definitely be making more just general gaming content kind of like this. Thanks for watching, and remember,
the world of special place. Cherish life and never waste.
Everyone loves a sunshiny day.
We're gonna keep it that way. Cause clean is better than dirty, and dirty's meaner than clean.
Let's all lend a helping hand. Mario can't do it alone. He'll spray his water to fly around and clean the sludge that's on the ground.
Cause clean is better than dirty, and dirty's meaner than clean.
Super Mario Sunshine, only for Nintendo GameCube. Rated E for everyone.